Long before it became a state, long before wagons rolled across its plains and cities rose along its rivers, the land of Missouri existed as a crossroads, of water, of cultures, and of destiny. It was a place where great rivers met, where civilizations rose and fell, and where the future of a nation would one day be decided. At the heart of Missouri's story are its rivers, especially the mighty Mississippi and the vast Missouri River. These waterways were more than just natural features, they were lifelines. They shaped the land, carved fertile valleys, and provided routes for travel and trade long before roads or railways existed. To those who first lived here, the rivers were everything. Thousands of years before European arrival, the region was home to advanced Native American societies. Among the most remarkable were the mound-building cultures, often associated with the Mississippian civilization. Near present-day eastern Missouri, just across the Mississippi River, stood one of the largest and most sophisticated pre-Columbian cities in North America, Cahokia. Though located just outside modern Missouri borders, its influence extended deeply into the region. Cahokia was not a simple settlement. It was a thriving urban center, with thousands of inhabitants, organized streets, trade networks, and massive earthen mounds used for ceremonial and political purposes. Its people were skilled farmers, cultivating maize and other crops that supported a large population. The society was complex, hierarchical, and deeply connected to the rhythms of nature. Over time, however, Cahokia declined, and by the time Europeans arrived, it had long been abandoned. In its place were various Native American tribes, including the Osage, Missouria, and others, each with their own cultures and ways of life. These tribes lived off the land, hunting, farming, and trading, maintaining a balance with the environment that had sustained them for generations. Everything began to change in the late 17th century, when European explorers entered the region. The French were among the first to explore Missouri, drawn by the promise of trade and expansion. In 1673, explorers Jacques Marquette and Louis Joliet traveled along the Mississippi River, opening the door to further exploration of the interior. Soon after, French traders and settlers began to establish a presence in the region. Unlike the Spanish in the south, the French were primarily interested in trade, particularly the fur trade. They formed alliances with Native American tribes, exchanging goods such as metal tools, weapons, and textiles for valuable furs. By the early 18th century, the French had established settlements in the Missouri region. One of the most important was St. Genevieve, founded around 1735, making it the oldest permanent European settlement in Missouri. It became a center of agriculture and trade, reflecting the French approach to colonization, less focused on large-scale conquest and more on integration with the existing environment and peoples. Another key development came in 1764, when the city of St. Louis was founded by French fur traders Pierre Laclede and Auguste Choteau. Located strategically at the confluence of the Mississippi and Missouri rivers, St. Louis quickly became a vital hub for trade and movement. Its position made it the perfect gateway to the vast, unexplored lands of the West. However, control of the region would not remain with France for long. In 1763, following the 7 Years' War, France ceded its territories west of the Mississippi River to Spain. Missouri became part of Spanish Louisiana, though French influence remained strong. Spanish authorities governed the region but often relied on existing French settlers to maintain stability. Under Spanish rule, the region saw gradual growth. Settlements expanded, agriculture developed, and trade continued. Yet, Missouri remained a frontier, distant from centers of power, shaped more by local conditions than by distant governments. This changed dramatically at the beginning of the 19th century. In 1800, Spain returned the Louisiana Territory to France, but French control was short-lived. In 1803, the United States purchased the entire Louisiana Territory from France in what became known as the Louisiana Purchase. This massive land deal doubled the size of the United States and brought Missouri firmly under American control. The Louisiana Purchase marked a turning point in Missouri's history. Suddenly, it was no longer a distant frontier of European empires. It was a central piece of a rapidly expanding nation. Its rivers, once used by Native Americans and fur traders, became highways for American exploration and settlement. In 1804, St. Louis became the starting point for one of the most famous expeditions in American history, the journey of Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. Commissioned by President Thomas Jefferson, the expedition set out to explore the newly acquired Western territories and find a route to the Pacific Ocean. Their journey began on the Missouri River, launching from near St. Louis. As they traveled westward, they mapped unknown lands, encountered Native American tribes, and gathered valuable information about the geography, wildlife, and resources of the region. The expedition would go on to become a symbol of American exploration and ambition, and Missouri, as its starting point, earned its nickname, the Gateway to the West. Following the expedition, settlers began to move into Missouri in greater numbers. Drawn by the promise of fertile land and opportunity, they established farms and communities along the rivers. The population grew rapidly, and Missouri began to transition from a frontier territory to a structured society. However, this growth brought new challenges. One of the most significant was the issue of slavery. As settlers moved into Missouri, they brought with them differing views on whether slavery should be allowed in the new state. This issue became a major national debate, reflecting the growing tensions between northern and southern states. In 1820, Missouri applied for statehood, but its admission threatened to upset the balance between free states and slave states in the Union. The result was the Missouri Compromise, a landmark agreement that allowed Missouri to enter the Union as a slave state while Maine entered as a free state, maintaining the balance. The Missouri Compromise was more than just a political solution, it was a warning sign. It revealed deep divisions within the country, divisions that would only grow stronger in the years to come. In 1821, Missouri was officially admitted as the 24th state. It was a land of opportunity and conflict, a place where cultures met and clashed, where rivers carried both commerce and change, and where the future of a nation was beginning to take shape. From its earliest days, Missouri had been a crossroads, a meeting point of peoples, ideas, and ambitions. Its rivers connected it to the world, its offered opportunity, and its position at the edge of the frontier made it a place of constant movement and transformation. And as the waters of the Mississippi and Missouri rivers continued to flow, they carried with them the story of a state that stood at the center of America's expansion, a gateway not just to the West, but to a future filled with promise, conflict, and change. As Missouri settled into statehood in the 1820s, it quickly became a land of contrasts, a state caught between North and South, frontier and city, river and prairie. Its central location made it a crossroads of commerce and culture, while its fertile land and abundant waterways attracted settlers from across the United States and Europe. From agriculture to river trade, Missouri's economy began to diversify, setting the stage for both prosperity and conflict. Agriculture remained the backbone of Missouri's economy. Farmers took advantage of the rich soils of the Mississippi and Missouri River valleys to grow crops like corn, wheat, and tobacco. In the southern part of the state, cotton production expanded, and, as in much of the South, this growth relied heavily on the labor of enslaved people. Meanwhile, small-scale farming dominated in the North, with settlers focusing on subsistence crops and livestock. Missouri's geography created a unique cultural and economic division, which would later play a central role during the Civil War. Missouri's rivers continued to shape its development. The Mississippi and Missouri rivers were not just natural features, they were highways for commerce. Steamboats chugged up and down the rivers, transporting goods, settlers, and ideas. St. Louis, located at the confluence of these two mighty rivers, became a major trade hub. Warehouses, docks, and markets sprang up, and the city quickly grew into the economic center of the state. It earned the nickname, Gateway to the West, a title that reflected its importance as the launching point for westward expansion and exploration. Westward expansion brought new settlers, but it also brought tension. Native American tribes, including the Osage and the Kickapoo, were gradually displaced through treaties, forced removal, and conflicts. The establishment of forts and trading posts marked the increasing presence of the federal government and settlers, and the Native Americans who remained were pushed further west or into reservations. These forced migrations left a lasting mark on Missouri, shaping both its demographic landscape and its social history. Missouri's growth was closely tied to transportation innovations. In addition to steamboats, roads and early railways began to connect cities, towns, and farms. By the 1850s, railroads were expanding rapidly, linking Missouri to neighboring states and the eastern markets. These connections allowed farmers to sell their crops further afield, merchants to expand their trade networks, and cities like Kansas City and St. Louis to flourish as centers of commerce. The state's strategic location made it a gateway not only to the West but also to the economic opportunities of a rapidly growing nation. Yet Missouri's prosperity masked growing divisions. The question of slavery was never fully resolved within the state. While the northern part of Missouri leaned toward free labor ideals, the South strongly supported slavery. These opposing interests mirrored national debates and created a tension that would eventually erupt into violence. The 1850s saw Missouri become a flashpoint in the national struggle over slavery. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 allowed settlers in neighboring Kansas to decide for themselves whether to permit slavery, a concept known as popular sovereignty. Missouri, with its proximity and divided loyalties, became a battleground. Pro-slavery Missourians crossed into Kansas to influence elections, while anti-slavery settlers moved in from the north. This period, known as Bleeding Kansas, was marked by violent clashes, raids, and bloodshed. Missouri's position on the border made it a critical player in this sectional conflict, foreshadowing the larger war that would soon engulf the nation. When the Civil War erupted in 1861, Missouri found itself deeply divided. Though it remained officially in the Union, many Missourians sympathized with the Confederacy. Guerrilla warfare, raids, and skirmishes tore across the state. The infamous bushwhacker William Quantrill and his raiders operated in the region, leaving a trail of destruction. Missouri became one of the most contested states of the war, with neighbors and families divided by loyalties, and communities devastated by the violence. Despite the chaos of war, Missouri's economy continued in pockets. Agriculture persisted where possible, and St. Louis remained a hub for Union supplies and trade. The rivers, again, proved vital, allowing movement of troops, resources, and goods. The state's location made it strategically critical, and armies from both sides fought for control of its key cities and transportation routes. After the war, Missouri faced the daunting task of reconstruction and reconciliation. The abolition of slavery dramatically changed the social and economic structure. Freed African Americans sought to establish their own communities, schools, and churches, contributing to Missouri's cultural fabric despite facing systemic racism and segregation. Reconstruction in Missouri was uneven, but it laid the groundwork for the state's evolving social and political landscape. The late 19th century brought industrialization and urban growth. St. Louis and Kansas City became centers of manufacturing, trade, and transportation. Railroads and later streetcars expanded cities, and immigrant communities from Germany, Ireland, Italy, and other European nations added to the cultural mosaic. Missouri became a state where frontier traditions met industrial modernity, blending rural and urban life in a unique way. Agriculture also modernized. Farmers adopted new techniques and crops, while livestock production expanded. Missouri became known for its wheat, corn, and livestock, supplying both local markets and distant cities. The introduction of mechanized farming equipment, improved transportation, and new business practices helped Missouri move into a more industrialized and connected economy. By the early 20th century, Missouri had established itself as a pivotal state in America's expansion westward and its economic development. Its rivers, cities, and farmlands were deeply interlinked with the nation's growth. St. Louis hosted the 1904 World's Fair, the Louisiana Purchase Exposition, showcasing Missouri as a place of innovation, culture, and history. It was a moment of pride, demonstrating how far the state had come, from Native American lands and French settlements to a modern American hub of trade, industry, and migration.